Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to our webinar today. Um, I am grateful to be here with all of you. So our theme today is Ayurveda Fall Detox and Grounding Practices. So hopefully the information that Joe and I covered today will be beneficial to all of you. So let's just quickly introduce ourselves. Joe, you want to start?
Yes, I would love to start. Of course, the moment we hit record, our cat that's been missing for 5 days, who just arrived, had to come in and claw me. So you guys might see me like pushing a cat away here who I love and want to cuddle with, but I can't.
That's
So
the
funny.
beauty of doing things from home.
Yes, especially when he's been missing for days. And yeah, we're so grateful he's back today. So yeah, thank you, Crystal. It's fun to be here. My name is Joe Tandberg, and I'm an Ayurvedic wellness counselor and a certified counselor and yoga teacher, and work in the realm of energy medicine and healing, and also with plant medicine. So I'm a certified cannabis clinician, and been practicing all of these modalities starting back in the late 2006, 7, 8 range, and have just been a student for my whole life. And now I try to teach as I learn, and it's a never-ending process, which I'm thrilled to share today.
Thank you. So a little about me. I'm not so much in the Ayurveda world, although I've studied some in yoga trainings that I've done. But I have started to do some of my own Ayurveda cleansing, and I definitely follow a lot of their practices. So I'm super excited to learn from you today, Joe. But as far as my background, I've been teaching yoga for about 10 years. I took my very first yoga class about 24 years ago. So it's been quite a long journey in regards to yoga. This year, I wrote and published my first book, Yoga Beyond the Physical. And right now, I'm just teaching yoga, and I have my online offerings and just things like that I'm really trying to focus on to help bring people into just a deeper state and relationship to themselves. So I'm excited to be here today. And let's talk just a little bit about what Ayurveda is, so that our listeners who maybe aren't as familiar can kind of understand Ayurveda and the relationship that it has with yoga.
Absolutely. So Ayurveda is considered one of the oldest forms of medical science in the world. It goes back in written form about 5,000 years. Before that, it was passed on orally by tradition. And Ayurveda is a natural form of medicine, and it looks at everything as energy, much as Einstein did and does, and how physics came to be what we understand it today. But before we had all the tools that we currently use for understanding the world. And so Ayurveda is based on an understanding that everything in the universe is created from different densities of being, starting with space, which moves into air, which then moves into fire, water, and earth, which makes up everything about us as humans, and the animals, the trees, the mountains, the clouds. All of them have different elements in different proportions. And we take that from a macrocosm view to a microcosmic view. We're looking at the human body and what percentage of these different elements does each person have, because we're all born with these 5 elements that build our body. So and they can be broken into 3 different energies. So we take the 5 elements, we break them into 3 energies that are known easily as wind, fire, and earth. They're called doshas in Ayurveda. And these doshas are called, wind would be vata, fire is considered pitta, and kapha is our earth energy. And so these different elements that form these different doshas are responsible for the creation, the sustenance, transformation, everything that happens within our body. And we look at how our body reacts to certain elements, and with those reactions of how we handle life and how we handle stresses, what helps to calm us, what helps aggravate us, is basically looking at the different balances of these different doshas in our body. So the wind, and I'll break that down just a little bit to make it not so esoteric. So the wind dosha, for instance, which is made up of space and air, it is the dosha responsible for all things that have movement to them. So taking a breath in, that's governed by vata. exhaling it out, that is governed by Vata. In that process, there's a transformation of bringing in oxygen and letting out carbon dioxide, and that is governed by Pitta. It's a change that happens. And so there's heat involved in our body. You can feel the heat in your mouth and in your chest as we breathe. Kapha, the form of structure, is what builds the cells in our body, builds the building blocks of who we are, or the bark in a tree, or its root systems, the muscle and soft tissue within our body. So each of these doshas, each of these elements creates who we are, and they govern our psychology, how we handle stress, how we are artistic, how we're disciplined, how we're not, and how we digest food, and how well our elimination systems in our body work. So that's kind of a general idea of Ayurveda. It's a very expansive practice. It includes, most importantly, routines, foods, herbs, types of exercise, everything down to, understanding the best colors and numbers and things that resonate with you as an individual. It's a very personalized way of treating someone in a holistic manner. We treat the person and not the disease when we're speaking through an Ayurvedic lens.
So since we're in our fall season, should we talk a little bit about Ayurveda and how it relates to the season that we're in?
Absolutely. So Ayurveda looks at not just how everything has built and created as according to these doshas, but also the doshas represent and govern, very importantly, aside from all the systems in our body, they govern the seasons and even our circadian rhythm. So we call it a 24-hour clock. Time is a human construct, but even in that time of 24 hours, we can break down from a natural perspective through the natural world without numbers, the times of day and night in our body, that different systems are stronger and other systems are more at rest, if you will. And those are governed by the doshas. The same is true with the time of year. So summer is kind of the easiest to figure out, that it is represented by fire, and fire is represented by the sun. It's the hottest time of year. As we move out of summer, well, let me pause there. While we're in any season, our body is going to mirror or reflect the different characteristics of that season. So if you live in a hot, dry climate like we do here, on the west of the Rockies for the most part, or in this area, we all have dry summers. Most of us have very little humidity in the West Coast, and in the gorge we have wind, and so that adds an element of dryness to the body. And Vata, being that it is the doshas that are made up of air, the movement of space through the universe, is very drying. You walk outside on a windy day and, your hair gets dry, your lips get dry, your skin gets dry. You add the element of heat to that, and now you get that sun-baked effect and that heating. Well, that heating goes all the way through our body. And by the end of summer, depending on what type of lifestyle we're leading, how well we're taking care of ourselves, how well we're countering that heat both on our skin and internally, and processing the heat, we then move into the fall season, when we're moving into the drier season, or the cool and dry season in most parts. Eventually we have the wetness come, but it starts with dryness. And that heat in the body needs to be dispelled. The heat in the body builds, and these three doshas are located and reside in different parts of our digestive tract. In Ayurveda, everything comes back to how well we're digesting life. And digestion is about food. It's about the water and the liquids we take in. It's about the whatever's in the air, as far as environmental, and it's about what's in our mind and how we handle our emotions. So toxins are more than just food related, more than just water related, and more than just what we're breathing, but they also could be from traumas, from grief, from unprocessed emotions. So as you build up in the summer and you have all this heat building in you, you may or may not notice it. If you're someone who already has a natural propensity towards excess heat, or one of your doshas, what you find out is the fire dosha, is Pitta, then you might find by the time September comes around that you're having some issues relating to too much heat in the body. You might be having skin issues. You might be having rosacea or rashes, or acid reflux, or potentially digestive issues, or problems with either constipation or the other direction, where chronic diarrhea, for instance, heart issues, any thing that really has to do with how heat can impact your body can start to aggravate and build. And now it's setting you up for potential disease or problems with your health during the fall and winter months. So if you think of it that way, when we get to fall, we want to start doing things to cool off and then prepare for what's coming next. Crystal?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. When you mentioned all the excess heat from the summer, I actually had some skin issues come up, just some like, I don't even know what they were, to be honest, but a little bit of like some dry patch on my face and a little bit of itching on my skin. And I know it was that excess heat, and I tend to be overly pitta anyways, which I constantly have to, work towards cooling that. But it was a very obvious reaction to the season, um, which led me into an Ayurveda cleanse. So that was kind of the next step that I took as I transitioned into fall. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to do this webinar with Jo today. I had just experienced an Ayurveda cleanse, and she's done so many and counsels people on that. So I thought that it would be great to learn from her and for us to kind of share our experiences. So one thing I want to talk about is why we detox. And I don't think it's a secret that, our environments, and depending on where we live, sometimes we have more, but just the amount of toxins that we take in is, I think, at the highest level it's probably ever been.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And, if you live in a city, then I think that you're going to be exposed to even more, but doesn't matter where you live, we can't get away from them anymore. And also depends on, the food that we eat, how we're, like you said, how we're digesting our life, I think that plays a really big role. But Jo, you want to speak a little more on toxins and why
Sure.
we detox?
Absolutely. And the body's designed to detoxify itself on its own. And it does that all day, all night, as soon as we start living in our bodies. And it does that through our sweat, through our urine, through our feces, through our breath. However, it's been hit, like you said, with so many extra toxins that we weren't, we didn't evolve with these toxins. These are all within the last 1 to 200 years for the most part. We have endogenous toxins, which are bacteria that can build up in our own body in the form of bacteria, typically from a poor diet, high saturated fats, processed foods, not enough fibers, too much alcohol, not enough pro or prebiotics in our diet, those kinds of things, which are the easiest because they are literally, self-created, easiest to shift in your diet and shift in your routine, not necessarily always the easiest to identify right away. And then we have like you referred to, the exogenous, or the factors and the toxins that come in from our air and from our water, specifically when you're living in a city. And those different toxins can come in the form of pesticides and emissions, chemicals in supplements that aren't regulated, chemicals in food that isn't organic, chemicals in food that we think is organic, but it's not organic. So there are so many things that we bring into the body. And then, of course, the emotions are the third kind of grouping of the types of toxins. And most people, we've evolved with emotional toxins. Humans, as soon as humans started interacting, there's going to be issues. And we've evolved with bacteria and viruses and things like that. What we did not evolve with is the environmental type toxins that we have. Everything from cosmetics to foods to laundry detergents to hand soaps to plastics in everything. And, there was a recent study and they tested for presence of 212 known carcinogenic chemicals in Americans. And they found almost every single one of them in this very large group that they tested, plus 44 more that they hadn't been testing for. We now find toxins in amniotic fluid. We're finding microplastics in breast milk and amniotic fluid. It's everywhere. So what do we do about it? Right? So how do we handle this without, feeling like it's the end of the world? Well, Panchakarma, which is the deepest form of cleansing in Ayurveda, which literally means 5 actions. So, and I want to back up really quick about Ayurveda. So Ayurveda means, it's a Sanskrit word, and I love the meaning of it because it means the wisdom of life. And Sanskrit is a forebearer of Latin. So before we had, anything written in Latin, it first was written in Sanskrit. So we're taking a word back 4,000 or 5,000 years that is about a whole system of medicine, from surgery to nutrition to obstetrics to gerontology. All of it falls under the umbrella of Ayurveda, which, broken down to its origin of word, is the wisdom of living, which I just think is absolutely beautiful. And so in this wisdom of living scenario, at least twice a year, if not 4 times a year. With the seasons, it would be recommended that one would go through a cleanse to help purify, detox from the previous time of year, and then to purify, cleanse, and rejuvenate going into that next season, because we're all in different seasons. We're also in different seasons in our life. So when we're born until puberty, we're in the structural formation. We're in the Kaphic time of our year. When we move in from puberty into about menopause, andropause, we're in the Pitta time of year. So regardless of your doshas, you're still going to be in that time where that extra heat is going to be influencing who you are and how you're living. And then when we move into our later life, after we've gone through menopause, or for men, andropause, now you're in the Vata time, which is the most drying time. It's why we tend to see diseases kick in. We tend to see more gastrointestinal issues because of the drying of our tissues, and why it's so important to have remedies for that. So understanding the seasons are really important, and detoxification, and from an Ayurvedic perspective, is very different than in like Western diets or Western belief systems. Very different. It's not about starving yourself. It's not about just eating, celery every day. It's not about, doing coffee enemas or drastic things like that. It is drastic in the way of how you may feel when it's over, because it can truly help to reverse processes of disease and very severe issues of digestive, reproductive, pain, so many different ways that the body responds to stress over time and then manifests itself in a disease or a disorder. So when we're talking about an Ayurvedic cleanse, it is something that's done over at least 21, if not 28 or more days. There's 3 parts to it. There's a preparation. If you're doing the full event where you're having body work done to you, which is what Panchakarma is, it's these 5 actions that are done to the body to help remove the toxins. And then there's the post time. And so those are broken into different time periods that you kind of schedule ahead of time. It involves a lot of counseling. It involves possibly changing a routine or 2 or 12, eliminating foods that can be triggers and allergens, introducing some gentle oils in the form of cleanses and enemas, and also introducing herbs that help to detoxify the body. And then it has actions to help pull the toxins from the body. And then after that is over, it's rebuilding and staying on this beautifully cleansing diet while you then slowly reintroduce foods. And then it's much easier to find trigger foods that might have been causing acid reflux, or causing bloating, or causing constipation, or causing the hiccups all the time, or joint pain and inflammation that can be, in a weak area of the body or everywhere in the body. So these cleanses are really important because they get in and they cleanse out what has built in our body. And I think what's really important to understand in Ayurveda, and why it's so different from any other cleansing system, is toxins come in 2 forms. They can either be in a form that's hydrolypic, where they are excreted out of our body through a water system, tears, sweat, urine, or they're lipotrophic, which means that the only way they're going to be brought out of the body is going to be through a fat. And so when we take in a chemical that our body has not seen before, or doesn't know how to process, or hasn't evolved with, then what happens is it encases itself. That molecule has a structure that encases itself in fat molecules, little bubbles of fat is the way I envision it. And those little fat molecules, we're dealing with like a sticky, slimy substance that is matching another sticky, slimy substance. And so it will then adhere to some place in your gastrointestinal tract. And then that is the beginning of the problem. And what we refer to that in Ayurveda, it's undigested something, matter, food, emotion, chemicals, toxins, you put the word in the blank. But what happens when we don't have the mechanism or the evolution to expel this from the body is we store it. And the more we store, it starts to block the channels. Think about taking your car in for an oil change, and it's got all that sludge in it. Well, if your body has been building up sludge for years, possibly decades, then that sludge goes pretty deep, and it's going to affect all the other systems of your body, all the way to your tongue, to your eyeballs, to your ears, to your nose. All secretions, all movement, all transformation in your body is going to be interrupted. And so what Ayurvedic cleanses do is they gently, by changing the diet, by supporting the body, and then by moving into this kind of very, it's somewhat of a linear a linear experience and you follow certain rules, but you will experience it in a different way because everyone is so unique on how we process things. But ideally, with going through these processes, you're removing this ama, this undigested stuff out of your body from all different places and out of the mind. What's so important is a lot of this fat stores in bone marrow, and Ayurveda puts a lot of weight on the importance of the health of our bone marrow. And Ayurveda looks at bone marrow, not just of what's inside the bone, but what's inside of our skull, the brain, and what's inside of our spine in the spinal cord. And so without those parts of our body functioning properly, all communication is interrupted. And so we look to go in and nourish all the way to the bone marrow. And that is the kind of the bird's eye view understanding of detoxing through the Ayurvedic lens.
It's funny, as I'm listening to you, I think about all my past of all the cleanses I've done, and I've done a lot of them. And, but listening to you, it makes me feel like, gosh, if only more people knew this, would we make changes? Would we actually follow these steps? And I guess, we'll find out, and maybe all of our listeners can report back to us to see, like, does this resonate with you? Are you running home and going to start a cleanse? Like, one thing that I've been just kind of thinking about that I learned, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago, is that they're even finding glyphosate in our rain, like it's in our atmosphere, it's in our environment, and there's nothing we can really do about it. I mean, there are some things we can do, but we can't control everything. So it almost feels like, not almost, it feels like we don't really have a choice but to do these cleanses, whether it's Ayurveda, if this is, your path, or something different. But my experience with other cleanses, so in my 20s, I used to do 2 cleanses a year, like in my mid to late 20s. And a lot of times it'd be raw food cleanses, or I'd do like some, insane master cleanse or whatever. And it was good for me at the time. But then, life happens and you age and your priorities shift. And for me, my priority has been more about taking care of my body and my soul and my spirit, my mind, and really nurturing myself. And when I checked in the last couple of years, because I did take a little break from cleansing, mainly because I didn't have the energy for it physically. Mm-hmm. And then when I finally felt like I was strong enough again to start cleansing, I wanted an effective cleanse that was very nurturing. And that's how I feel about the Ayurveda cleanses. Like, you get to eat, you feel like you're supported, it's like this grounding, nurturing food. And at the same time, it's really helping to release things. Your mind gets clearer, you have more energy. My skin flare-ups that I had this last time went away. So it's pretty incredible.
It is. It is. Did you have something else you wanted?
Well, I was just going to say, the only other thing I was going to ask actually you next is I'd love to hear about your recent
I'll just jump in and say, I think you have a question. So yes.
Wait, let's see what we've got. A couple messages. Let's make sure there's no questions here on this side. Okay, good.
Yes, Chris. I think many of us have sludge in our systems, and it's, and even those of us that, have been like Crystal was saying, Crystal, because I've known Crystal for a very long time now. And, both of us, we live healthy lives. We watch what we eat. We're careful, with what we see and hear. And we understand the importance of, purity of the senses, because that's going to create your mind. And so what are you feeding your mind? But we still are going to have sludge, we're still going to have things, and we still are going to have stuff that needs to move out. And it's not about weight loss. However, people that have excessive, whatever their number is, some people get stuck on numbers. Some people are more about how they feel or how their clothes fit. But if there is ama in your system, you will lose some weight because it's stored in fat. So the fat starts to reduce. And I've seen some pretty incredible shape shifting happen through panchakarma, and through even without the panchakarma, but or minimum amount of panchakarma, meaning these actions that I'll talk about here in a moment. Just the changing in one's routines and changing on times that they eat and when they eat certain foods and what foods they combine and what they keep away from each other can really start to make a difference in how your metabolism is working and how your body is storing fat. So recently, my husband Eric and I went through a cleanse. We're actually still coming out of it. Today was one of our first.
I love that you and Eric did this together. If I could get my husband to do something like that, I'd be pretty happy.
It was so I'm married to a physicist, and definitely when we started combining our knowledge, we met 5 years ago and got married 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago. When we first met, I'm kind of in this metaphysical world and he's in this physical world, but we both had so much respect and interest for each other and what we understand, even though I didn't really understand what he knows, and I still really don't. And he didn't really understand what I was teaching and espousing, but they grew together, and it's been really beautiful to watch this happen. So we decided, a quick background. I was diagnosed in my teens with Crohn's disease. And back in the day, I didn't know anything about any of this. Like I was in Georgia, so that's still a challenging place to get really good holistic care unless you just know the right places to go. At the time, I was in South Georgia, which made it even more challenging outside Savannah. And I was diagnosed and I was really sick. So right away, I was put on hardcore pharmaceuticals, high levels of steroids. And it was the beginning of a pretty devastating decade and a half. In which time I birthed 2 children successfully, but with a lot of post problems due to my health. And in that time ended up on 5 years of chemotherapy due to the severity of my disease. Finally, I had a pretty major surgery where I had a small bowel resective surgery, parts taken out, zipped back up, put back on chemotherapy for life, I was told. And that was the beginning of my next journey. So I started looking at alternative methods back in 1991, reading books and just what you could before the internet, right? In a desert of holistic healers. Moved out to the Gorge in the early 2000s and started having more opportunities opening up for me for different ways of healing on the West Coast. And that brought me to yoga, became a yoga teacher. And then through my yoga training, Ayurveda was a very essential part of our training. And I met some of the most incredible teachers in the world and started studying with them and kept becoming a student. So part of why I was doing all that, besides being fascinated by it, was helping me feel better. And each time I started sliding with my health, and now I had these tools, I was able to keep myself from running to the doctor, getting an ultrasound or having a colonoscopy and being given drugs. I mean, they always gave me drugs. I was it was crazy how many pharmaceuticals, most of which I didn't even fill since I was a teenager. But now I had a son who had health issues. I had a daughter who had a severe brain injury, which created some other health issues. And so there were 3 of us in my unit that needed help. And by being introduced to Ayurveda and then starting to learn so many things, it kept all of us off of pharmaceuticals to this day. Now, fast forward to this year, these last couple of years, and my health took a little bit of a turn a couple of years ago. I got COVID, and then I was vaccinated and went through that. And then I got COVID again. And both times I got sicker or got sick to the point where it was starting to mimic some of the issues I had with Crohn's disease. I also was diagnosed with hyperthyroidism extreme with Graves' disease in 2014. And that took a whole huge hit on my health for many years. So from 2014 to 2016 2013 to 16 was a pretty rough patch. Trying to get myself back in balance using Ayurveda. I was determined. I did not want to stay on pharmaceuticals, and I was able to get off of them in 6 months. And get my thyroid back to normal. So with these tools and with the fact that I was experiencing pain that was floating throughout my body. So up until just a couple months ago, I could even say a couple of weeks ago, I've had arthritis since I was in my 20s. It's part of the Crohn's disease pathways. But when I understand Ayurveda, I have a much better understanding now, realizing I had some junk in my system that hadn't moved out. And it can also be caused from stress. And I started a business a few years ago. We had COVID. I've been helping my dad with cancer. My mom's been having heart problems, We all have our stories. And every single one of us could have a very similar, severity of issues going on in your life at any period of time. But it's how we handle those stressful experiences. And apparently unfortunately, I got to a place where I wasn't handling it very well because my body was just hurting. I'm in perimenopause. So every month it's like, I wonder what's happening this month. I'm not really sure. It's been a little bit of like whack-a-mole. And so I have that going on in the background. I'm getting hot flashes. I wasn't sleeping at night. And the cortisol was just raging in my body. And so I reached out to my Ayurvedic doctor, who's also one of my main teacher in Santa Cruz, and kind of told him what was going on. And he's like, you know what you need to do? I'm like, yes, it's time for a cleanse. And it's time for Panchakarma, which means, doing this cleanse. And then we actually drove down to California and spent a week, but 5 days at the clinic, meeting with our doctors every day and going through with therapists through this program I'll tell you about here. At the end of it, we drove home a few days ago, and we've now been back since Saturday, and I have not had any pain. And so that is stunning, because I went there not even sure I could stay in the car for 2 days. Like, how am I going to pull this off? But I was starting to kind of feel a little better before we left anyways, because I had put the discipline hat on. Like, okay, I'm doing this. And as soon as that happens, in the heart, I'm a coffee drinker. My husband is a big coffee drinker. It's part of our morning. We wake up together, we make this coffee, we have our little morning routine. And I knew that was the first thing we had to let go of. And that's the hardest part. I swear the hardest part is the mental preparation. Because once you do it, and actually we drove to California and back, and he's like, I'm driving without caffeine for 4 days, without coffee. And there was a little hiccups here and there, but for the most part, sticking to it became easier each day because we were feeling better each day. And so the way that Ayurvedic cleanses work, and I really do recommend, though, if you decide to do something like this, you have somebody guide you, because there's whole books written on this for a reason. There's a lot of things to take into consideration, and they are very specific and unique to the individual, like what their dosha is. So if Crystal and I were both going to Panchakarma, just like Eric and I did, we likely will not be taking all the same herbs. We probably will not be receiving the same exact treatments, and we might have a different dietary plan given to us at the end, due to our nature of who we are and how we process everything. So what typically happens, no matter what your dosha is with an Ayurvedic cleanse, is you start by removing foods from your diet, and foods that can be inflammatory. So meat, dairy, meaning milks, eggs, anything dairy, all meats, except if you have to have some meat. Some people are like, I cannot live without it. Then chicken or fish. Steamed vegetables only, some fruits and some nuts, and a little bit of grain like basmati rice and split mung beans. You take in certain kinds of spices that help to break the foods down, like cumin and coriander and fennel. You remove other foods like garlic and onions, things that can be aggravating to the system. And this isn't forever. This is just for a period of time, just to put that out there. And while you remove these foods, you're constantly drinking these different warm drinks throughout the day, like different teas to help to digest food, different teas to help kind of keep things moving, very gentle and light. And that builds up over time for about 7 to 21 days. Some people might do that for an entire month and just kind of work themselves into this diet, reducing sugar, reducing any processed food, reducing any wheat. So it sounds kind of rough at first for many of us that are on either a Mediterranean or standard American diet, because this might be mostly what you're eating. But as soon as you make that shift and you start having these foods where your biggest meal is at lunch, your smaller meal is in the evening, having your meal finished by 6:30 at night, being in bed, screens off, between 9 and 10, getting up with the sun, all these things, reducing your screen time is a big part of the cleanses, putting away the phone at night, turning off the computer, not answering email at midnight. And then you move into the second stage. And the second stage is something that is by practitioners are stepping in now and helping you. And the second stage is
actually, before we get into the second stage, I just want to say one quick thing. So to our listeners who are here right now, like, does the first stage make sense? That's preparation for what we would actually consider the cleanse, and it's all important, like they all need to happen. But if there's any questions about the first stage, feel free to quickly type them in the chat box. And then also, Joe, I want to ask you, I kind of know the answer already, but I'm just going to ask you anyways, like, would it be important to take a dosha test first? Definitely. So that we know we're getting rid of the major things that are going to, that could cause problems, with dairy and meat and coffee and, alcohol and things like that. But I would think that finding out what your dosha is ahead of time so that you can kind of go into your cleanse with this preparation of like,
Absolutely.
oh, I have way too much pitta right now. So in my cleanse, I'm going to take out A, B, and C.
Exactly.
And Joe's going to talk about the actual cleansing portion next, but if anybody has any questions before, then I just wanted to allow a little space for that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, one of the other things that other foods that are reduced down is like all nightshades, especially if there's extra heat. So tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, which can be really challenging when you have a garden full of that in September and you're going, or October, and you're starting a cleanse. You're like, what do I do with all this food? So preserving it in some way that you can enjoy it later. If it's something that your body digests, you might find later when you reintroduce certain foods that they really don't agree with you. And that's part of what this is. It's an unveiling of things that can be irritating your system that you're so accustomed to, you don't even know it anymore. And I can give an example of that. I always realize this during my cleanses. One of the foods to give up is eggs. And, I'm always, at first, my first reaction is, oh, that's easy. But then I start getting into it. And I'm like, wow, that's a comfort food for me. For me personally, eggs are comfort foods. And I never thought of them that way. I realized in a conversation with Eric, it's the only thing my dad knows how to cook is eggs and bacon. So if I go back to like childhood, emotional connections, that's kind of a funny thing. The only meal my dad has literally ever made is eggs and bacon and toast, usually with a few 4-letter words, as he's breaking things and cracking, and he's not a cook. And so subconsciously, I think, for me, even a hard-boiled egg is like a quick, easy protein fix. However, I now realize those foods are causing inflammation in me. And I didn't know it till I took it out and then put it back in. I was like, wow, I don't feel well. And the only thing I did differently today was have an egg. And so part of this detox is an unveiling of information that our body at a cellular level knows, but our consciousness, our mental side does not, if that makes sense. So going back to the cleanse itself. So once you get the body prepared, before you move into the next section, there's a little bridge that happens where you do an internal oleation cleanse. So because these toxins that we have a hard time processing, and this ama, which can build up in our system, is fat soluble. It needs fats to remove. It needs fats to kind of come out of the body. And so the best way to do that is to give it fat to attach to. So we do a couple different things. We start with a castor oil cleanse, which some people go, when they hear it, but it's really not that bad. We usually recommend people do it on a Sunday or a day that they can relax. And you start first thing in the morning with a couple tablespoons, again, it's dosha specific, of castor oil, pure, raw, fresh. So not something that's been sitting under your sink for the last 3 years. Castor oil with a little bit of juice, like a citrus juice, and you sip warm teas all day, maybe miso soup, maybe a light vegetable soup, but no animal products the night before or the day of. And that helps to start getting the action going with the colon, to start cleansing things out of your system in a gentle, maybe a little cramp, depending on your body, but in a more gentle way. And then you start doing, and then you move into the next phase where you're going to be increasing on a daily basis the amount of fat that you're taking in a healthy form. And we recommend only using ghee in this situation. So ghee is one of the most revered foods in Ayurveda for healing. It's tridoshic, meaning it's doesn't matter what your dosha is, it's safe for almost all people. There are a few exceptions. And ideally, it's something that you've made yourself with, raw, unsalted butter in best case scenario. Worst case, which is still not worse, you go buy some high quality. And you melt a little bit every day. And you start with a teaspoon on the first day. And then the next day, there's a second or tablespoon. And each day you build for 7 days. And as you're eating less and you're increasing the amount of ghee, your body is starting to depend on that fat. And that fat is giving it, along with we eat khichdi every day, which is basmati rice with some fresh herb or some digestive herbs and some split mung beans and maybe a little bit of like carrot or a little bit of a cooked vegetable like a zucchini or something. Very simple, and it's a full meal within itself at lunch. So you're getting all the amino acids and the proteins and everything you need to help you without putting any stress on your intestines. Simultaneous to that, you're taking a little bit more of this ghee every day. And as you're building the ghee, you're reducing the amount of food you're taking in. And so now your body is looking for energy. And as your body is searching around looking for energy, it's going to start pulling its fat storage. And that fat storage, as you get into those fat cells, is where we're trying to release the toxins. So it does that nice big kind of scouring around, scrubbing out, pulling out on the 7th day specifically is when it really, the magic happens, pulling out those toxins and reintroducing them into our gastrointestinal tract. Now we're set up to start really cleansing. So then the next thing that happens is ideally you go to a clinic, you find a special place. You know, back in the day, well, still to this day, people would travel to India and they would spend 1 to 3 months, you know, living in this beautiful place and, you know, walking along the gardens and eating fruits from the trees and going through these treatments. But, you know, modern day makes that very challenging, especially the financial aspect of it. So now there's clinics all over the world that you can go from 3 to 21 to 28 days or more. It is a financial investment, but part of that is important to keep in mind because you are investing in yourself and you're investing in something that can truly transform the health of your body. So, and you're paying for, you know, doctors and practitioners and materials. So it's an event. So our event was, we drove to California, checked into our Airbnb, showed up at 9 a.m. the first day, met with our doctors, our specific doctors that we already have a relationship with. And they do a very thorough evaluation. Typically, you've already had one, which we had 2 to 4 weeks prior, because that evaluation before you start your cleanse is going to clarify your dosha. It's going to introduce what type of foods that you want to be removed, because everyone's going to do a general, but then there's specific things that go from there, and then possibly introduce some herbs. And those herbs will be to help the process, but also we'll be looking at where you are, what your dosha is, what time of year it is, and where the imbalance is. So for instance, Crystal, I remember a couple of years ago, you had called me for some recommendations on some cleanses, and I think it was a spring cleanse. And then there was another time you were doing a fall cleanse. And you're like, oh, so I take this herb. I'm like, no, you don't take that herb this time. Now you take this herb. So again, it's little nuances, but those herbs were either going to be cooling and scraping or heating and aggravating depending on the time of year. And we wanted to not be heating and aggravating. So these herbs are introduced. Now you're there in person. They're going to ask you, did you do the cleanse? Did you drink the castor oil? Did you take the ghee? And if you say no to any of those, and I mean, you're honest, they're going to send you home because you're not ready, because now you're going to go through something and it could actually create more of a problem, or it just is not going to be the results that are available to you. So it's really important the preparation is very clear, at least the best to your abilities. You know, we're all going to have different levels of success and discipline, right? So then you start the best part, and the best part is these treatments. So minimum 5 days. And the first day, you're going to lay on a massage table and have copious amounts of oil poured all over your body and rubbed in a certain direction to help stimulate and to support your lymphatic system. Because again, we're moving the fluids in the body to dislodge these toxins that you have just spent weeks kind of getting ready without any extra stress of having to digest any other foods in your body. So you start with that. You'll ideally those weeks prior, they will always recommend that you're finding, if possible, a sauna or a steam place in your town where you live, so you can start sweating and releasing through the skin. So we're trying to release through all parts of the body. They might give you herbs to help support your kidneys and or liver, so that you're really doing a nice filtration job for your blood. So now that you're there in the presence of practitioners, day one, they're going to rub these oils that are specific for you. So there'll be herbs cooked into them before you arrive. And possibly oils put in your nose, possibly oils put in other parts of your body. And then you'll finish this 2-hour treatment. They'll likely do oils on your head called Shirodhara, where they will fill a beautiful, like a brass vessel with a tiny little hole at the bottom, and they will have a steady stream of oil on your third eye. And that oil is recycled, and they keep pouring it over you and moving it through your body. And it is phenomenal, specifically for cleaning and clearing the mind and cooling the mind. We get a lot of heat behind our eyes that can cause that inflammation in our head, which can create a whole plethora of issues in that realm of ears, throat, nose, brain. Each day there will be new actions added. So pancha means 5, karma means action. So you're going for a minimum of 5 actions, and we have 5 senses. Each treatment ends with an oil enema, which if you're in a place and you've never had that, that can be like the scariest part for most people, especially me with Crohn's disease. I was terrified of this years ago. I had all scenarios of things going wrong. Like, oh, it's going to be like the worst sitcom ever. But it's so gentle and it's so easy. And, you're doing it, they're mixing it, but you're the one actually, inserting a tube into your bottom, and you're the one that's taking in the oil. And it doesn't cramp you up. It doesn't create like an explosive bowel movement. It just is soaking into an already cleaned out colon. And it's usually one day we'll have just oil, sesame oil that's organic. Another day we'll have herb. The next day will be plain. The next day will be herb. And the last day will be plain. And so we're introducing into the colon and into the lining of your colon very nourishing herbs to help with this process and to continue to cleanse out all this excess gunk, the sludge. You may have on the second day, you will have, so that starts the process. So the massage is called abhyanga. The pouring of the oil on the head is called shirodhara, shiro being the head. The next day, you'll start with an herbal scrub, which is my favorite, one of my favorites. So again, made to your body, your skin type. It's going to be heating or cooling, or again, what your body needs. And they will completely cover you and give you a scrub in a certain direction, again, to support your digestion, elimination, and lymphatic systems, followed up by another full abhyanga. And then you'll sit in a steam unit with your head outside so you don't get overheated, and a cool rag over your chest so your heart doesn't get too hot, constantly monitoring you. Again, finishing with an enema. Go home, relax, take a walk, what have you, read a book. Keep a journal. It's always recommended to journal. Day 3, you come in, you do it again. This day, they're going to start to really personalize the treatment. So my pain was in my joints throughout my body. For me, they used sandbags. So they use cheesecloth filled with medicated herbal sand, heated in a hot pot, and then literally put on your body in various places, and then rubbing with the joint, with the blood flow, with the lymph. It's incredible. So again, it's a very grounding practice. If there's areas of the body that have pain or inflammation or just need special attention, they may build a dam out of dough and create a wall, like a fortress around that space, and slowly fill it with warm medicated oil, and have that oil hold there and seep in over about 20 minutes. And that's a very powerful, I had it on my eyes. So a dam was built. I looked like I had a ski mask made out of Play-Doh, and my eyes close, and they heat up some ghee that the doctor actually made at home for me, and had a certain type of ghee. And she brought that in, and they started dropping it in my eyes, 1 drop at a time, until the whole thing is full. So it's like 1.5 inches or 2 inches of liquid ghee. And then you open your eyes and you roll them around, and you're drawing in this fat into your eyes to start working on all this area in the mind, in the head, to help stabilize and calm the mind. They can do that on your feet. They put it on your feet too. One day I had herbal buttermilk poured onto my head for 20 minutes, and to cool my head. I had a lot of heat. So each day is very different. Each day ends with an enema, with different oils. And then you have a nice lunch afterwards. Well, nice lunch being, again, khichdi, split mung beans, and, kind of an Indian flavor, but very easy to digest. And you sip on teas, herbal teas all day long, and certain prescribed teas. So we did it for 5 days. Some people can do 7, 10, 21, 28. For us, it was time and money, and that's what we could budget. I will say doing it with my husband was pretty profound. It's also challenging because you're both kind of going through your stuff. The first couple of days, we both felt terrible. If you're coffee drinkers like we were, there's a detox that still was happening when we got there, because we were still having just a little bit, and we did have a 2-day drive, a 14-hour drive, and we gave in one day and like split a small coffee. You're like, and so we were foggy, and we were a little grumpy, and we were irritable, and I wanted ice cream for some ridiculous reason. I barely even eat ice cream, and he was craving steak and eggs. He never eats steak and eggs. We were having really weird cravings. And the doctors every day, they sit with us for like 30 minutes and ask questions. What are you craving? How are you feeling? How did you sleep? How are your bowel movements? What do they look like? Anything come up? They ask a lot of questions. And then the last day, we were like dancing out of there. We both felt amazing, and have light dinners each night. We would eat like around We would have no grains at night. We would have a piece of like white fish. I think we were in Santa Cruz. So we went and bought some fresh fish and we had that and broccoli, at 6 o'clock, and finished with herbal tea, and then went for a walk and we were done. And then we came home and we have stuck to this diet. So ideally you stay on that diet for 5 more days when your panchakarma ends. And then at the end of those 5 days or longer, some people stay on it for a lot longer because they feel amazing. You start introducing one food group at a time. So, maybe you have, somewhere in, at the end of 5 days, maybe like today, we actually had our first, bread. We had ordered some dough from our local bakery. We made like a little veggie pizza for lunch, and it was amazing because I haven't had anything like that in 3 weeks. It tasted so good, and very simple. And then you watch for the next 24, 48 hours. How do I feel? Does anything shift in me? And pretty quickly, you'll know which foods could be causing inflammation that you're so used to eating you never knew. So all in all, I will say, I can't recommend it enough. If nothing else, doing the cleanse minus the panchakarma and daily on your own, doing oil movements, getting lymphatic gentle massages from a practitioner, doing gentle yoga every morning, meditating, breathing, all of those were part of our detox too. I love, that was kind of another part of it, but I wanted to focus more on what scares people the most, which is the foods that you're eliminating and what you're putting in your body. But it profound, and we both feel amazing. And Eric shape-shifted his body, and he's been targeting a weight loss, and he's almost there. And I came back pain-free, which is the best thing I could have asked for.
That's great. Wow. So I'm just going to quickly outline like all the things really quick so that our listeners have kind of a clear understanding, because I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed like, oh, I don't have the money to go to California and do a panchakarma. So and you kind of mentioned it there at the end. So basically an Ayurveda cleanse would be the preparation phase, which is eliminating, a list of foods and beverages that aren't ideal for us anyways. Well, to some degree, we won't go there completely. And so you're just kind of preparing. And then the day before you really prepare, and that's when you start the castor oil. And when we share this video, we'll try to put some notes in there for you so that you have a little more of this information. And so you do the castor oil day, and then you start the khichdi. And I know that there's different lengths of times that you can do a cleanse from start to finish. So for example, for me, I did 7 days of the khichdi. And so leading up to it, I think I had 7 days leading up to it, which my diet's pretty clean anyways. I gave up coffee a long time ago. I rarely drink alcohol anymore, things like that. So it's like, you can do 3 days and then 3 days of khichdi, and then, or you can do 7 days to prepare and 7 days of khichdi. And then the last stage is reintroducing. So you don't have to do the panchakarma. And I'm fully on board with what you say about if you're not going to do it, like make sure you're doing some of the treatments for yourself. Like if you have a sauna or access to one, go sit in a sauna. If you have, the daily massage.
Epsom salt bath.
Yeah.
And body oils and foot baths.
Daily massage is really that self-care treatment. And I think one of the most important things too, if you're doing all this at home, is to carve out time for this. Like everything takes time. It takes time to prepare for the cleanse. It takes time to prepare with all the food. Like, I mean, khichdi is not necessarily a hard meal to make, but you've got to really have everything dialed. And then that's really all you eat. And I've been told that if you can't handle eating khichdi 3 times a day, then you can substitute with oats in the morning and then khichdi for lunch and dinner.
You don't eat khichdi 3 times a day.
Yeah.
So what was recommended to us is green juices. We did, every day for weeks, we did green juices in the morning, or hot cereals like with oats and cooked apples and pears and cardamom, things that are like digestive spices, and ghee. And then evenings, sometimes khichdi, but typically just like some steamed vegetables or cooked vegetables and a grain. So the khichdi is really a lunch thing during the main part of the phase. Before and after, it's just trying to bring it in. Today Eric's like, please no khichdi today. I'm like, he's like, Please. I'm like,
Especially
yeah.
if you are doing khichdi for lunch and dinner, it's like, okay, by the 7th day, you're done.
Yes, it could be, and you want to try to stick with it. So it's more just making sure that we don't recommend a lot of salads. You can have like some fresh greens with your food, but not having salads as your main meal. And regardless if you're in a cleanse or not, in Ayurveda, we always try to encourage people to have their largest meal during the day at lunch between like 10:30, 11 and 2 or 3, and a light dinner, like a soup or something light, maybe a little bit of what you had left over at lunch, but not going crazy at night and trying to have your last at least 3 hours from your last meal before you lay your head on the pillow. Really important. And that alone has changed people's blood sugar levels. Try not to snack during the day, to hold on to that fast time. So when you finish your dinner and you wait until like 8 or 8:30 in the morning, you have a real fast that you're breaking.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's when the body does its cleansing, is when we sleep. The best cleansing comes during our sleep times.
The cooked vegetables, I think, is a really important thing to kind of get. And even like your fruits. So whenever I was doing the cleanse, I would sometimes do stewed apples, but I wouldn't do, a bunch of raw fruits, or I wouldn't do any raw vegetables. So it's really about supporting your digestive system.
Exactly. Raw foods, fruits, and vegetables are harder to digest. And we're trying to make it so easy that the energy is going into detoxing and not breaking down fresh foods. We're trying, I mean, it's still fresh, but not raw fresh. And some of us, depending on our doshas, if your dosha is predominantly vata, apples that aren't cooked are not going to ever feel good. They're likely going to give you a stomach ache, because they're going to bloat you. They're hard to break down for some people. For others, it's great. And for me, I love apples. I have to eat them. I might a bite or two, otherwise they're cooked. Someone else might eat them raw every day and have never thought twice about it.
So that brings up this next point. And I know we're already at our hour. So if you don't know your dosha, and if you're not quite certain about your dosha and how it, how the season affects your dosha, and I'm just going to say, like, either going online and finding a test that you can take. And I think Joe's website has one, zvbotanicals.com, or you can always have a session with Joe. She does counseling, Ayurvedic counseling, if you ever wanted to just learn a little bit more about your dosha before you dive into a cleanse. And then, other than that, I just kind of wanted to focus a little bit before we close. Thanks. So Joe just put her website and stuff in the notes, so you guys can grab it there.
Yeah, there's an interactive dosha there. It's a minimal one. Like if I'm working with you, it's much longer, but this is a nice introduction to some of the questions that you would be asked, for instance.
Yeah, and Joe also has a lot of really nice blogs on her website as well, where you can learn a lot about Ayurveda and some other practices as well. So something to check out. So before we end today, I want to talk a little bit more about the fall season and some other things that we can do to support us. So we have Ayurveda, we have, this cleanse that we can do right now. Really, you can do it. You can prepare for it right now because we're in the fall season and it's a really good time to do that. But then I just wanted to talk about just some other really grounding practices for us. And a couple of things came up for me when I think about the fall season. And I'm here in the Tetons, and I feel super blessed to have a lot of sunshine in Idaho right now. And I guess, there's been a rarity of sunshine in the gorge in Washington, Oregon too. But the leaves are changing, and whether they're changing colors or they're dropping from the trees, it's like this perfect opportunity for us to go out in nature and to really just experience the season. So two things that I love doing in the fall is, one, nature walks, especially before all the leaves fall off the trees and you just have these beautiful colors. But nature walks, just like connecting to the earth and to the beauty that's around us. And then also this other practice that I started doing, I've done it a lot in my life, but I started doing it when I really didn't feel well a few years ago. And I had like really severe adrenal fatigue, and just going out and laying on the earth, whether you put a blanket under you or not, but just laying on the earth and just receiving, in yoga, we often talk about like laying in Shavasana with your palms face up to receive, but just that exact posture of just laying on the earth, feeling the ground beneath you, and then just receiving the gifts. You know, Joe was talking a lot about toxins that get stored in our body, and they're not just physical toxins, it's like energetic toxins as well. And the more that we can come into stillness and be open to just really release and receive, I feel like the more that we can remove things from our body energetically. Joe already mentioned Epsom salts bath, another favorite of mine in the fall and in the winter. Restorative or yin yoga, especially yin yoga. I think restorative kind of falls more into like the winter season, but they're both really grounding practices. And then eating with the seasons. So we talked a lot about food today, but eating with the seasons is so important. And if you can get local food, then I feel like that's just like key. You know, it's like the best thing that you can possibly do. And because one, you're honoring the season, you're honoring the natural cycles of life, and you're getting in touch with nature. So recently, I actually volunteered at a farm here. It's a biodynamic organic farm, and not for any other reason than I wanted to learn and I wanted to connect with the land and just be a part of, just be a part of something different. And I think my biggest fear in this lifetime, if like the world just all goes to hell, would be access to good organic produce. And so connecting with farmers was like important for me coming into this new community, and also learning, how do I grow at 6,200 feet in elevation? And apparently you can grow a lot. So I feel confident. You can pretty much grow anything. There's a lot of myths. So maybe we'll do a farming webinar next. And then the other thing, so there's two more things that I'm thinking of. One is pranayama, right? Like a lot of us here today are yogis, we've done yoga or we teach yoga. And pranayama helps bring us into a state of balance. It helps balance the masculine and feminine, or the sun and moon energies within us. And it really helps us to connect more deeply with ourselves. And if we're struggling with making choices that are good for us, then coming into doing a pranayama practice, I think, is going to help center us so that we really feel more aligned to make choices that are good for us. So, and then the last one I would say is meditation. And a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to sit and meditate. Because if you're not used to meditating, the second you sit down, it's like your body aches or your mind goes crazy, probably more crazy than it would throughout the day, because all of a sudden you're here in the stillness and you're not used to it. And so I like to remind people that meditating and a meditative state are two different things. Mm-hmm. And when you can practice a physical practice of yoga or pranayama or mantra or any of those things that can help clear your energy channels, that can help you physically as well, that will help bring you into more of a meditative state. So don't get discouraged if meditation feels hard for you. Then try asana, try the physical practice of yoga, or bring in a pranayama practice. Mm-hmm. So those are my grounding tips for the fall. And I'd like to close with a little practice. It'll be a short one, but just to kind of help us transition and also absorb everything that we've learned today. Before I do, is there any questions, or Joe, would you like to add anything else?
No, well, thank you for that. Yes, I'm just shaking my head, agreeing with everything you say, and keeping in mind, breathing and focused breathing is our first tool of defense. It's really the most powerful healing agent we have. Our body deeply, inherently knows what to do to heal, but it's been given quite the challenge, and especially in modern times. But many of us don't breathe in a way that is as nearly as productive as it could be. And so just, I say all the time, just by thinking about how you're breathing is going to shift your breathing. And that's the first stage, is just being aware, because awareness is everything. Because once you're aware of your breath, you're going to be aware of your thoughts. You're going to be aware of your mood, your emotional state, what you're eating, what you're drinking. So it all starts with the breath.
Yeah. And I've often said, and I just believe this for myself, that if you can do one thing, is changing the quality of your breath, and that will change the quality of your life. There is
Absolutely.
no way that if you learn to really consciously breathe, there's no way that it won't change your life. Everything else will fall into place. So I think that is, I just got goosebumps. Like that is like one of the most important things. Okay, so let's kind of go into, I don't see any questions. So let's go ahead and come into a little meditation seat wherever you are. And if it's not safe to do so and you're just listening, that's fine. But if you can, then close your eyes. And we'll just take a couple of moments to find our center. So what that means to me is letting your awareness go within, letting your breath slow down, let your body relax. Feel your feet on the earth. Feel your sit bones root towards the earth. And just a big, deep breath. Just let all the tension that you're carrying be released from your physical body, from your mental body, emotional body. And we're just going to do a simple pranayama practice from here. It's just called equal breathing, and it helps, again, to just invite in that balance. So I'm going to count for us to begin, and then we'll take a few rounds on our own. So on your inhale, we'll count 1, 2, 3. Pause for 1, 2, 3. Exhale, 1, 2, 3. And pause, 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to repeat it one more time. Inhale, 1, 2, 3. Pause, 1, 2, 3. Exhale, 1, 2, 3. Pause, 1, 2, 3. Now keep doing that practice on your own, nice and slow. Go at your own pace. If you want to count for more than 3, you are welcome to. Just keep it all equal and no strain at all. And we'll take just a couple more rounds. Finishing the last round that you're on. And then you can return to a natural, slow, deep breath. Keeping your eyes closed, bring your awareness to your heart center. And I want you to just connect to what it is that your heart or your soul wants. Letting the answer come from within, not from your head, but from your heart. What is it that you want? Why did you decide to participate in this webinar today? Maybe you're feeling like you need to do something, change something. Maybe you want to connect more deeply with the season. Maybe your body is asking for a cleanse or for more support. But what is it that you want? And without any stories or judgment, we just simply notice what comes to us. And then I'd like you to just set an intention, set it in the present tense as though it's already happening. If you want more ease in your life, bring it in right now. Good health, good fortune, just invite it in. And then I want you to imagine a white light at your heart. And this light is very bright. And the white light represents love and healing. And you can imagine that white light growing brighter and getting bigger and bigger, allowing it to expand beyond your heart and start to fill up every cell of your body, down through your arms, your fingertips, your torso, your legs, your toes, up through your head, your face. Just allow this white light to resonate through every cell. And then imagine it getting brighter and brighter and bigger until it starts to expand beyond your physical body, creating a field around you. And we're just going to take a few breaths, just resting here in this place, this field of light and love. I want you to acknowledge yourself for who you are today and your life up to this moment. A moment to feel gratitude that everything in your life has led you to this moment. And maybe it's not clear why. Just having that acceptance and that gratitude. And take a big, deep breath. And letting go of anything that doesn't serve you, anything that gets in the way of what it is your heart desires. And then let's bring our hands to our heart, either in kind of prayer, Anjali Mudra, or hands, palms on your heart, a bow of your head, and just a moment to express gratitude for yourself. And a moment to just silently say all the things that you're grateful for. And also to remember your intention, inviting it in one more time. And whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and lower your hands and gently open your eyes. It is an honor to be here today with all of you and with you, Joe. And I am super grateful, not only to learn, but also just to share space with everyone and support in any way that we can. And as we close, I'd like to again just quickly say that if you want support with your Ayurvedic cleanse, Jo is here to help you. And she's already put her website in the notes. And then I'm going to post my website if you don't have it already, crystalborup.com. And the main things that I offer right now, I have a women's retreat coming up in Joshua Tree, California in February. Jo has a retreat in Baja coming up in January, and that's on her website, and Joshua Tree is on mine. And then I also have an online community that has been slowly growing that it's really my soul work, let's say that. So we do a lot of soul journey guided meditations, and then we do Power of 8 meditations, if you're familiar with that practice. So And then there's a few other things as well. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us. And Joe, do you have anything else to add before we end? Oops, you're muted. How did you mute yourself? Okay.
Thank you. I muted during the meditation because there's construction that just started outside. No, thank you for the opportunity. This has been wonderful. And like Crystal said, I have different events coming. I teach courses and starting to teach some yoga again here in White Salmon, and creating a program next year, a transformational journey to kind of take people through this whole process of understanding what a year of Ayurvedic living can do for your life. So January in Baja is the next big gathering, and just stay tuned. If you go to my website, if you're not already on my mailing list, please do the dosha quiz, sign up, and you'll kind of hear some of the great things we're doing and educational content. So I try to empower people the best I can so that you can really make the best decisions for your health and that for your family. So thank you for being here today.
Okay, and this is recorded, so we'll be sending out the replay to everyone via email as soon as we can. So thanks a lot, and we'll do this again. We'll have to. It was fun.
Yeah, it was great. Good. Thanks for coming, everyone.